I'm Tiffany, 23 years old, and until recently, my life was pretty straightforward. I live in the house I inherited from my grandmother, my mom's mom, and it's been my safe haven since my mother passed away from aggressive cancer a few years ago. After Mom died, it was just me and my dad. He lives on the other side of the city, and despite the horrific traffic and long commute, I made it a point to visit him every Friday after work. It became our little tradition. I'd bring his favorite takeout food, and we'd spend the evening watching old movies and sharing memories of Mom. Those evenings were precious to me, a way to keep her memory alive and stay connected with Dad. But everything changed during one of those Friday visits. I showed up at Dad's place as usual, carrying his favorite Chinese food, expecting our normal quiet evening. Instead, I found him nervously pacing in the living room, and he wasn't alone. "Tiffany, honey, there's someone I want you to meet," he said, gesturing to a pretty woman sitting on the couch. She looked to be around 35, professionally dressed, with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile. "This is Rachel. She's my fiancé." I nearly dropped the takeout bags. Fiancé? Dad had never even mentioned dating anyone, let alone being serious enough to propose. For a moment, I felt a surge of anger. How could he move on from Mom so quickly? But then I caught myself. It had been several years since Mom passed, and Dad deserved to be happy, didn't he? Rachel stood up and extended her hand. "I've heard so much about you, Tiffany," she said warmly. "Your father talks about you all the time." I forced myself to smile and shook her hand. "Nice to meet you," I managed to say, even though my mind was racing with questions. The evening proceeded awkwardly at first, but as we ate and talked, I started to relax a bit. Rachel seemed nice enough, and it was obvious how much Dad adored her. He kept looking at her with those puppy dog eyes, and she'd touch his arm or shoulder occasionally in a way that seemed natural and affectionate. Just as I was starting to feel better about the situation, Rachel dropped another bombshell, so casually you'd think she was commenting on the weather. "Oh, by the way," she said while helping Dad clear the dinner plates, "my boys will be so excited to meet you. They're 6 and 8, such wonderful ages." I nearly choked on my water. Boys? She had children? Something about the way she delivered this information, like an afterthought, bothered me, but I pushed the feeling aside. After all, this was a lot to process in one evening. "That's great," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "I look forward to meeting them." As I drove home that night, my mind was spinning. In the space of one evening, my quiet, predictable life with just me and Dad had transformed into something completely different. Things moved quickly after that first meeting. Before I knew it, Rachel and her sons, Tommy and Jake, had moved into Dad's house. The boys were pretty much what you'd expect from kids their age, running around, making noise, throwing occasional tantrums, but also having their sweet moments. Tommy, the older one, was into video games, while Jake, the younger one, couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes. 4 months flew by, and suddenly there was a wedding to plan. Rachel threw herself into the preparations with an intensity that was almost scary. She had opinions about everything: the flowers, the venue, the music, even the exact shade of tablecloths. "Tiffany, sweetie," she'd call me, her voice dripping with honey, "would you mind watching the boys for a couple of hours? I have an emergency meeting with the florist." Or, "The cake tasting got rescheduled last minute, could you please keep an eye on Tommy and Jake?" I didn't mind at first. It was only for a few hours here and there, and the kids were manageable in short doses. Besides, I wanted to show Dad I was trying to make this work. Then came the wedding day. The ceremony started well enough. The boys were cleaned up and on their best behavior, sitting quietly in their little suits. But as the reception dragged on, they got restless. I was sitting at my table, picking at my dinner, when I saw Tommy start flicking peas at his brother with a spoon. "Hey, guys," I said firmly, walking over to their table. "That's enough. You're going to hit someone." Jake had already grabbed his own spoon and was retaliating with mashed potatoes. "Cut it out," I warned them. "This isn't appropriate behavior." That's when Rachel materialized out of nowhere. Her perfectly manicured hand clamped down on my arm like a vice, and she practically dragged me behind one of the decorative pillars. "Don't you ever speak to my children like that again," she hissed, her face twisted with anger. Gone was the sweet, smiling woman I'd known for the past few months. They were throwing food at other guests, I tried to explain, rubbing my arm where she'd grabbed me. "I was just trying to prevent a scene." "Listen to me very carefully," she cut me off, her voice low and harsh. "These are my children. You have absolutely no right to discipline them. When you have your own kids, if you ever have your own kids, then you can play mommy all you want. But until then, keep your mouth shut." Before I could respond, she'd plastered that fake smile back on her face and swanned back to the reception, cooing over Dad and charming the guests like nothing had happened. The changes started just a few days after the wedding. It was like Rachel had been waiting for that ring on her finger to show her true colors. That Friday, I drove to Dad's house as usual, fighting through rush hour traffic for over an hour. I had picked up Dad's favorite lasagna from Tony's, the restaurant he and Mom used to go to on their anniversaries. But the moment I walked through the door, something felt different. Rachel was lounging on the couch, our couch, where Mom and Dad used to sit, scrolling through her phone while the boys chased each other around the living room. She looked up at me with an expression I can only describe as annoyed. "Oh, Tiffany, you should really call before coming over." I stood there with the takeout bag in my hand, feeling like an intruder in the house I grew up in. "Call? But Dad and I always spend Friday evenings together. It's our tradition." Rachel sat up straighter, her eyes narrowing. "Well, things are different now. Your father has a family." The way she emphasized family made my stomach turn. "And I'll be the one establishing new traditions around here." I looked at Dad, who was sitting in his armchair, pretending to be absorbed in his tablet. He didn't say a word. Didn't even look up. The father who used to stand up to anyone who upset me, who taught me to always speak my mind, just sat there in silence. Then Rachel's face suddenly lit up with delight. "But since you're here," she stood up and grabbed her purse. "And you brought dinner. This is perfect. Your father and I have been wanting to try that new Italian place downtown. We can have a proper date night, and you can watch the boys." Before I could even process what was happening, she was pulling Dad up from his chair. "Come on, honey, let's get changed." 10 minutes later, they were gone. Just like that. No asking if I was free, no checking if I had plans. The lasagna I'd brought for Dad and me was being devoured by Tommy and Jake, who were arguing over who got the bigger piece. The next 3 hours were a blur of breaking up fights, preventing them from jumping off furniture, and trying to keep them from destroying the house. By the time Dad and Rachel finally came home around 11 p.m., I was exhausted. "Oh, we had such a wonderful evening," Rachel gushed, not even looking at the mess the boys had made. "We're absolutely exhausted though. Boys, time for bed." She herded them upstairs without so much as a thank you to me. Then she turned back, stifling an obviously fake yawn. "Well, it's getting quite late, isn't it? You should probably head home, Tiffany. You have quite a drive ahead of you." The following week, things got even worse. Rachel, who didn't work and spent her days managing the household, her words, started showing up at my house unannounced with the boys in tow. "I have an emergency mani-pedi appointment," she'd say, already backing toward her car. Or, "Your father's taking me to that new French bistro. The boys hate French food. We'll pick them up in a few hours." She didn't ask. She didn't even pretend to ask anymore. She'd just drop them off and leave, like I was some kind of on-call babysitting service. Sometimes she'd show up right as I got home from work, still in my office clothes, too tired to argue. Finally, after weeks of this nonsense, I snapped. It was a Wednesday evening, and I had just finished a brutal day at work involving 3 client presentations and a system crash that lost me 2 hours of progress. All I wanted was to take a hot shower and collapse on my couch. Instead, I pulled into my driveway to find Rachel's SUV parked there, with her already unloading the boys and their backpacks. "Perfect timing," she chirped, pushing Tommy toward my front door. "I have a spa appointment and then dinner with your father. They'll need dinner in about an hour." "No," I said firmly, still standing by my car. "I wasn't hired to be your personal babysitter. I'm tired, I've had a long day, and I didn't agree to this." Her face turned an interesting shade of red. "How dare you?" She grabbed both boys by their arms, practically yanking them back toward her car. "Boys, get in the car," she snapped, then turned to glare at me. "You'll regret this attitude, Tiffany." She peeled out of my driveway so fast she left tire marks. I went inside, made myself a cup of tea, and had just started to relax when my phone rang. It was Dad. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked, before I could even say hello. "How dare you speak to my wife that way? She's in tears." "Dad, wait." "No, you wait. You're being cruel and selfish. I won't tolerate you treating my wife like this. She's been nothing but kind to you." "Dad, please, just listen." But he'd already hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. That was the first time in my life my father had ever spoken to me that way. A week passed with no contact from either of them. Part of me was hurt, but another part was relieved to have some peace and quiet. When Friday rolled around, I treated myself to takeout and a bottle of wine, looking forward to a quiet evening alone. I was getting out of my car when I heard noises coming from inside my house. My heart started racing. Had someone broken in? I was reaching for my phone to call the police when I heard what was definitely children laughing. What the hell? I unlocked my front door with shaking hands and found Tommy and Jake sprawled on my living room floor, surrounded by empty snack packages and juice boxes. The TV was blaring cartoons, and there were crumbs everywhere. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. Tommy shrugged, not even looking away from the TV. "Mom dropped us off like 4 hours ago. She used the key to let us in and said we could eat whatever we wanted and watch TV." The key. Of course. I'd given Dad a spare key right after I moved in case of emergencies. "When is she coming back?" I asked, dreading the answer. "She's not," Jake piped up cheerfully. "She and your dad left for their honeymoon in Hawaii. They'll be gone for 2 weeks. I stood in my living room, staring at the 2 boys who had been left alone in my house for 4 hours. Anything could have happened to them. They could have hurt themselves, started a fire, or God knows what else. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. Before dialing Rachel's number, I opened my recording app and hit start. Something told me I needed to document this conversation. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, on what must have been the 10th ring, Rachel picked up. "What do you want?" she snapped. I could hear waves in the background. "We're trying to check into our hotel." "What do I want?" I fought to keep my voice steady. "How about explaining why you broke into my house and abandoned your children here? Without even asking me?" Rachel's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. I used a key, so it's hardly breaking in. And it's not like you have anything better to do." "Excuse me?" "Well, let's be honest, Tiffany. You're just sitting at home alone anyway. No boyfriend, no social life, no family of your own. Consider this practice for when you finally manage to find someone willing to start a family with you." Before I could respond, she hung up. I immediately called Dad, my hands now shaking with rage. He picked up on the second ring. "What is it, Tiffany?" He sounded annoyed, like I was interrupting something important. "We're trying to start our honeymoon. Dad, Rachel left her kids alone in my house. She broke in while I was at work and—" "Stop making mountains out of molehills," he cut me off. "You're always trying to create drama. Can't you just let us enjoy our honeymoon in peace?" "I'm at work all day," I practically shouted. "I can't watch her kids." I have responsibilities, meetings, deadlines. Then hire a babysitter, he said dismissively. It's not that complicated. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. If it's that simple, why didn't you hire a babysitter before running off to Hawaii? We got a last-minute deal on the tickets, he replied, like that explained everything. There wasn't time to make arrangements. Look, I have to go. Rachel's waiting. Click. I stood there staring at my phone, barely able to process what had just happened. My father, who had once grounded me for a week because I forgot to call when I was going to be 10 minutes late coming home from school, thought it was perfectly fine to abandon 2 young children in an empty house for hours. That's when I noticed Tommy sprawled on my couch, tapping away at his smartphone. A thought suddenly hit me. Hey, Tommy, I called out, trying to keep my voice casual. Do you have your dad's phone number? Your real dad, I mean. Tommy barely looked up from his game. Yeah, we talk to him all the time. Want me to show you? He pulled up his contacts and showed me the screen. I quickly copied the number into my phone, my heart pounding. I stepped into my home office for privacy and dialed. The phone rang twice before a deep voice answered. Hello? Hi, is this Mr. Anderson? I took a deep breath. You don't know me, but I'm Tiffany, Rachel's new stepdaughter. I'm calling because, well, there's a situation with Tommy and Jake that you should know about. What kind of situation? His voice immediately sharpened with concern. Are they okay? I told him everything, how Rachel had been using me as free childcare, how she'd broken into my house while I was at work, how she and my father had abandoned the boys for 4 hours before jetting off to Hawaii. As I spoke, I could hear his breathing getting heavier. Text me your address, he said firmly. I'll be there in an hour. And Tiffany, thank you for calling me. True to his word, exactly 1 hour later, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found a tall man in his early 40s. Behind him stood another man in an expensive-looking suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Dad, Tommy and Jake shouted in unison, running to hug him. He wrapped them both in a bear hug, and I could see the relief on his face. Boys, why don't you go pack up your things, he suggested, ruffling their hair. And clean up any mess you made in Miss Tiffany's house. As the boys scurried around collecting their belongings, he turned to me. This is James Carlton, my attorney, he said, gesturing to the man in the suit. Would you mind if we talked for a few minutes? We sat at my kitchen table while the boys cleaned up the living room. Mr. Anderson, please, call me Steve, ran his hands through his hair in frustration. I've been dealing with Rachel's stunts for years, he said quietly, so the boys wouldn't hear. Missing scheduled visits, changing plans last minute, using the kids as pawns. But this? He shook his head. This is beyond anything she's done before. I pay $4,000 a month in child support, and she's using it to fly off to Hawaii while dumping the kids on strangers? Not to mention leaving them alone in an empty house, his lawyer added, pulling out a legal pad. Miss Taylor, would you mind telling me exactly what happened? Start from the beginning. I spent the next hour detailing everything, the wedding, the gradual escalation of Rachel's demands, today's events. The lawyer took detailed notes, his frown deepening as I spoke. Oh, and I have this, I said, pulling out my phone. I recorded my conversations with both Rachel and my father from today. Would that be helpful? The lawyer's eyes lit up. Very helpful. Would you mind forwarding those recordings to me? After I sent him the files, he played them back, nodding as Rachel's condescending voice filled my kitchen. When the recordings finished, he looked at Steve. This is exactly what we needed, he said. Abandonment, endangerment, misuse of child support funds. Your ex-wife has handed us a golden opportunity. The next 2 weeks passed quietly. Not a single call or text from Rachel asking about her kids. Not even my dad checked in to see if everything was okay. They were apparently too busy enjoying their Hawaiian paradise to worry about 2 young boys they'd abandoned in my house. Then came Friday. I'd just gotten home from work and changed into comfortable clothes when my front door burst open. Rachel stormed in like a hurricane, her face red with rage, my father right behind her. She was waving some kind of official-looking letter in her hand. "Tommy, Jake," she screamed, looking around wildly. "Where are my children?" I stayed seated on my couch, surprisingly calm. "They're with their father." Rachel froze. "What? Their father? You know, the man you had children with before you married my dad? The one who actually cares about their well-being?" She lunged at me, her perfectly manicured nails nearly catching my hair. "You little snake. Do you know what this is?" She shook the letter in my face. "This is a notice from family court. My ex-husband is suing for full custody. They're threatening to take away my parental rights." "Maybe you should have thought about that before abandoning your kids in an empty house," I replied, standing up to face her. "Or using them as pawns in your games. Or spending their child support money on Hawaiian vacations." She turned to my father, clearly expecting him to defend her. He stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "I never thought my own daughter could be so vindictive," he spat. "You've destroyed your stepmother's family out of pure spite. As far as I'm concerned, you're no longer my daughter." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my face neutral. "I didn't destroy anything, Dad. Rachel did that all by herself." Rachel let out another screech of rage and stormed out of my house. My father gave me one last disgusted look before following her. The custody hearing took place 3 weeks later. I sat in the witness box, feeling Rachel's glare burning into me as I calmly recounted everything that had happened. The abandonment, the breaking and entering, the casual disregard for her children's safety. When the lawyer played my recorded phone conversation with Rachel, her face went from red to white. Her dismissive laugh echoed through the courtroom. "Consider this practice for when you finally manage to find someone willing to start a family with you." The judge's expression grew stormier with each piece of evidence. By the time I finished my testimony, Rachel was slumped in her chair, her previous arrogance completely deflated. The verdict came down like a hammer. Full custody awarded to Steve Anderson. Rachel's child support payments terminated immediately. A stern warning that any further instances of child endangerment would result in complete termination of her parental rights. You'd think losing custody of her children would have humbled Rachel, but you'd be wrong. Instead, she and my father launched a campaign of harassment against me. My phone would blow up with messages calling me every name in the book. When I blocked their numbers, they started calling from different phones. When I blocked those, they began showing up at my house. They'd pound on my door at all hours, Rachel's shrill voice carrying through the neighborhood. "Open this door, you home-wrecking little bitch." I tried to ignore them, but one day, after a particularly rough week at work, I'd had enough. When the banging started, something inside me snapped. I marched to the door and threw it open. "You want to talk? Fine. Let's talk." They stormed into my living room, Rachel immediately launching into a tirade about how I'd ruined her life, how she couldn't afford her spa treatments anymore without the child support money, how dare I interfere with her family. I let her rant for about 30 seconds, before turning to my father. "Are you done?" "We're not done until," Rachel started, but I held up my hand. "I wasn't talking to you." I focused on my father. "Hey Dad, remember Mom's house? The one you're living in right now?" He blinked, caught off guard by the sudden change of topic. "You know, the house that Mom left to me in her will? The one I've been letting you live in rent-free out of the goodness of my heart." The color drained from his face. Rachel stopped mid-rant, her mouth hanging open. I stood up, drawing myself to my full height. "So here's what's going to happen. The harassment stops. The calls stop. The visits stop. Because if they don't, I'll evict you faster than Rachel here can say spa day. And then you can both try surviving on your salary alone, with no free housing and no child support money to subsidize your lifestyle." I walked to the door and held it open. "Mom would be ashamed of how you've acted. Now get out of my house." Rachel grabbed her designer purse and stormed out. My father lingered for a moment, looking lost, then followed her without a word. That was 3 months ago. They haven't bothered me since. Through the family grapevine, I hear Rachel's making my father's life hell, constantly complaining about their reduced circumstances now that she can't spend her kids' support payments on herself. Apparently, they can barely afford their lifestyle on just my father's modest salary. I ran into my cousin Sarah at the grocery store last week. She told me Rachel's been throwing tantrums about having to shop at regular stores instead of her beloved boutiques. My father looks tired all the time now, she said, like he's aged years in just a few months. Do I feel bad? Honestly, no. My father chose this. He chose to stand by and watch while his wife abused my kindness. He chose to say nothing when she abandoned her children in my house. He chose to disown me rather than admit she was wrong. I don't regret what I did. Sometimes standing up for what's right means being the bad guy in someone else's story. I'm okay with that. I sleep just fine at night knowing those boys are safe and loved, even if it cost me my relationship with my father. Postscript, I still own my father's house, and no, I haven't evicted him. Yet. But it's nice to have that card in my back pocket if they ever start up again.
My sister grinned and told me as I agreed to pay $30,000 for her wedding expenses, acting all high and mighty for just $30,000. Don't come to the wedding, I don't want you there. With your looks, you'll never get married, huh? It's a waste to save money. I'll spend it for you, she said, looking down on me. I realized there was no point in responding to my sister, who kept insulting me. So, I simply said, "All right, good luck," and left. My sister, who repeatedly made offensive remarks, ended up panicking afterward. Before I get into how things turned out, let me start from the beginning with my sister and me. I'm Hannah, a 30-year-old wedding planner. I've been dedicated to my career. Though still single, I enjoy my job that involves being part of people's milestones of marriage. At work, I've even started to lead the team. It's a responsible job and organizing many people is tough, but it's fulfilling. I've seen many brides through work and hope to get married someday. However, things aren't quite there yet with my current boyfriend. I've been dating Paul for about a year. He's a kind person, but lately, he seems indifferent. He often declines when I ask him out for meals or dates. I was suspicious, and then I got a shocking confession from my sister Candace. I'm dating Paul. You should break up with him. When I heard this, I thought, not again. It wasn't the first time Candace had gone after someone I was dating. Candace is 5 years younger than me. Since I was a kid, I have been often compared to her because we were complete opposites. I had a plain appearance and was shy, struggling with conversations. In contrast, Candace was cute, charming, and could make friends with anyone. Everyone, including our parents and relatives, adored her. Meanwhile, Candace always looked down on me, and I faced constant harassment behind the scenes. The only area where I could outdo Candace was academics. Yet, no matter how well I did on tests, our parents never praised me. Although I excelled in studies, they preferred Candace, who was charming and good at winning their affection. They never realized Candace's manipulative nature. Being good at studies isn't everything. You lack femininity, my parents would often say. The last straw was my father's comment. Candace is kind-hearted. It doesn't matter if she isn't good at studies. But in my eyes, Candace's personality was far from kind. Since childhood, Candace always wanted my things, like my favorite toys, books, clothes, accessories, everything. I complained to our parents. I hate it because Candace takes all my stuff. But their typical response was, just give it to her. Aren't you the older sister? Don't you think she's cute? At those times, our parents made me feel like I had done something wrong. As a child, I couldn't bring myself to say, "I don't think Candace is cute at all." Honestly, I disliked how she took my things and was always excused for it. Candace hated when I received more attention than her. Even if I was talking with our parents or relatives, she would immediately start with, "Listen. I am." And everyone would be drawn into her engaging stories, leaving me out. Besides, Candace would take away every guy I liked. In middle school, as soon as she knew I liked someone, she would date him. The first guy I dated in high school was also taken by her. Every time she took a guy from me, she would say with a smile, "Sorry. He likes me better." That smile of hers was unbearable. I started dating my current boyfriend, Paul, a year ago when I was 29. Paul is the same age as me, and I thought it might be time to start thinking about marriage. That's when Candace told me to break up with him. Remembering all the times she had taken someone away from me, it wasn't surprising, but I confronted Paul. After all, we had been together for a year. I thought there was no way he would choose Candace over me. "Sorry. I love Candace. She says she can't do without me. I have to protect her." I felt dizzy hearing that. I thought I was the one who couldn't do without Paul. Moreover, to hear that he had been betraying me for over 6 months was a shock. Instead of apologizing, Paul said he wanted to be with Candace. That was too much, and I complained to our parents. Candace has taken my boyfriend Paul, even though we both thought it might be time to get married. However, our parents sighed and tried to soothe me. It wasn't meant to be this time. We heard from Candace. She's going to marry Paul. You should congratulate her. If Paul loves Candace, there's nothing you can do. Stop complaining. Aren't you ashamed to be jealous of your sister? Despite my boyfriend being taken away, my parents kept defending Candace. That's when I realized my family was not on my side. I was hurt, but I broke up with Paul. Maybe it was lucky to split before marriage talks got serious, I told myself. Soon after, I heard that Candace and Paul got engaged. Then, Candace shocked me with her words. "Since you're single and only work, you should pay for the wedding. You must have saved up, right?" True, saving money is my hobby, and I might have saved more than others my age. But that money wasn't meant for Candace's wedding expenses. I had no intention of celebrating, but I planned to give them a gift at least. Yet, why should I bear the wedding costs? Not only Candace, but our parents said the same. Pay for the wedding, you know she doesn't have the money and we're barely managing our retirement funds. Just lend it to her. She said she'll pay you back later, right? Can't you even lend money to your family? I got tired of hearing this day in, day out. Reluctantly, I agreed to pay, ensuring Candace intended to repay me. Of course. I'll pay back everything. However, after I agreed to pay, I realized something. The invitation never came. Maybe she would hand-deliver it? I waited, but Candace never brought it. "Candace, where's the invitation?" She glanced at me and smirked. I sent them out to everyone. I haven't received it. That's because I didn't send one to you. What do you mean? You're not inviting your own sister? Even though I'm paying for the wedding, how can you not invite me? I was furious. It was as if she only needed my money and nothing else. Acting all high and mighty for just $30,000. Don't come to the wedding. Hannah, you're too plain. It'd be embarrassing if everyone saw you. Even Mom and Dad said, let Candace do what she wants. Hannah doesn't matter. It wasn't just Candace, but our parents agreed. Instead of anger, I felt sadness. They always sided with Candace. Seeing how shocked I was, Candace giggled. With your looks, you'll never get married, right? It's a waste to save money. I'll spend it for you. Realizing arguing was pointless, I decided I was better off not attending such a sister's wedding. All right, good luck, was all I said as I walked away. Candace called out, "Sorry you won't see the pretty bride." But I ignored her. The day before the wedding, Candace called. I ignored it, but she kept calling persistently. I sighed and answered. "Hello? What's up?" Candace was frantic. "What do you mean by that?" "About what?" "The wedding expenses. I got billed an insane amount." I laughed. Candace was finally realizing the situation. An insane amount? Oh, right, no more discounts. Tough, isn't it? Discounts? What do you mean? Candace was getting married at the venue where I worked as a wedding planner. I had told her if I was paying, it would be there. I had many connections, like florists, makeup artists, and MCs who could offer services at a discounted rate because of me. Candace agreed, wanting any beautiful venue as long as she could be the center of attention. Since I was paying, she likely never checked how much the discounts were worth. The wedding expenses were discounted because of my employee benefit. But since I'm apparently not invited, I canceled the discount and also stopped the payment. That's impossible, even without the gift money, there's a bill for over $30,000. Candace had skimped on the guests' meal costs but had lavishly spent on her dress, flowers, and production costs. Now that the discount is gone, it must be tough to make the payments. Good luck with that, I said as I hung up the phone. Before I did, I could hear Candace screaming on the other end, but I ignored her. After our call, Candace apparently tried to negotiate a lower price with the venue staff, but they were my colleagues and already informed of the situation. They stood by me and ensured that Candace was billed the full amount. Candace and Paul ended up in debt to pay for their wedding. Later on, it wasn't just the wedding expenses, but Paul's debts came to light too. He had always loved gambling. I kept an eye on him not to get too deep into gambling while we were together, so he spent it within reason. However, it seems Candace hadn't noticed Paul's gambling addiction. She was only interested in taking what was mine, not truly looking into Paul's character. While the couple was saddled with gambling debts, my parents came to me for help. "Please, lend Candace some money. Are you planning to abandon her? How heartless can you be?" Despite their outbursts, I ignored them completely and turned them away without a word. Candace and Paul, burdened with debt repayment, worked like slaves. Candace, with only part-time job experience, couldn't find a full-time position and was stuck with low-wage work. Paul, having quit gambling, was shunned at his company after they found out he switched from sister to sister and incurred debts because of it. Labeled the lowest of scum. He was isolated but continued to work due to the debts. I decided to distance myself from both my parents and Candace. Despite numerous calls from Candace begging for money, I didn't respond. "I don't have money to lend you. Do not contact me ever again." The same went for my parents. I told them I had no intention of being involved with them or looking after them in their old age. Since they had planned to rely on me, they were incredibly anxious, knowing I didn't care to maintain a relationship after they'd taken me for granted. "I have no intention of taking care of you after your retirement or providing financial support. Maybe your beloved Candace can take care of you." My parents were speechless at my words, but to me, they were already irrelevant. I wondered why I hadn't cut off contact sooner as I began to enjoy my freedom. Free from a sister who belittled me and parents who imposed everything on me, I felt more positive and even attended my first matchmaking party. Fortunately, I met someone great there, and we started dating. Both over 30, we were serious about marriage. My boyfriend, a banker with a stable income who doesn't gamble, turned out to be not only kind but also reliable. In fact, when Candace and Paul, along with my parents, frequently came to my house demanding money, it was my boyfriend who drove them away after learning of my situation. Please start detaching from Hannah. If you keep this up, we'll consult the police. His presence was truly reassuring. Not just kind, but dependable. Later, I learned that Candace had been persistently contacting him and even ambushed him after work, clearly trying to take him from me. Remembering all the times she'd taken someone I loved, I felt anxious. However, my boyfriend had no interest in Candace and he even found her repulsive. Unmoved by her persistent attempts, he proposed to me. I want to get you away from your crazy family as soon as possible. Let's marry and move quickly. I'm not beautiful and don't have much to offer, is that really okay? I asked insecurely. You've been brainwashed by your family. You are beautiful and have so many great qualities. I'll show you that from now on. Let's be free together. He assured me, and I nodded. Things turned around quickly. I got married and moved to a high-security apartment. My parents and sister no longer visit. A few months into the marriage, I found out I was pregnant, filling our lives with joy. Relatives say Candace and Paul are still struggling to pay off their debts, and my parents, now without their planned support from me, are reflecting on their actions. Even so, I've decided never to return to them. It may be tough for them, but their hardship is the result of their own actions. From now on, I plan to live happily with my supportive husband and our upcoming child. While the two chatted amiably, I quietly observed them. Then, turning to face me, my mother scowled. Oh, you're still here? I'm handing over the company to adorable Mia. I've always hated you, you know. Really. Such an ugly one you are. I haven't forgotten how you shamelessly followed your father. You're fired. Pack your stuff and get out now. I am Judy Baker. Currently, I enjoy living alone. I used to live at home until a certain event made me leave. It sounds nice to say it was a mutual decision, but in reality, I was kicked out. Reflecting on my life of over 30 years, I've overcome various challenges. Children expect love from their mother, regardless. I kept believing that if I continued to try hard, one day she would praise me. However, now I've come to terms that I'll never receive such things from her. My parents divorced when I was in middle school. The cause was my mother's infidelity. She was pregnant with a child not fathered by my dad. Probably their feelings had already cooled off. Dad didn't ask for alimony, perhaps it was his final act of mercy. Once the affair came to light and the other man disappeared, my mother had to raise my sister alone. Dad probably thought the unborn child shouldn't be blamed. After the divorce, I lived with him. 6 months after the divorce, Dad fell ill and passed away. Then, I had to live with my mother again, which meant a real trial. She never forgave me for choosing Dad. Honestly, I never wanted to return to her after her betrayal. However, as a 13-year-old, I had no other choice but to be with her. She ran a cosmetics company but was too busy to care for my sister, so I had to do it. She'd leave for work as soon as I got home and wouldn't return until late. Whenever we met, she'd repeat, "You're alive because of me. Take care of your sister." Living in such an environment, I felt compelled to earn her approval, and eventually, I became like a robot for her. Despite being a robot, I understood her favoritism towards my sister. Mia has such a cute face. Maybe she'll be the face of my company someday. On the other hand, Judy, you have such a plain face. And you're well built. I look like my mother. People say we're spitting images. My sister undoubtedly resembles the man my mother had an affair with. Even as a baby, she had distinct double eyelids and well-formed features. My mother adores her face, even though the man ran away. While my mother doted on my sister, she was very strict with me. If it's not a public school, I won't pay any money. Your grades must be all A. In my 3rd year of middle school, she insisted on this. Though vain, she invested in tutoring, which was a blessing in disguise. Regardless of the reason, it allowed me to focus on my studies in the tutoring center. I met her expectations and got into the high school she wanted. The same went for university. Only state universities. Private ones are a waste of money. I had guessed what she would say since she insisted on public during my high school entrance exams. So, from the first year of high school, I aimed for a state university and succeeded in one attempt. But then, complaints came after I got in. We live in New York, but the university I got into was in Los Angeles. She didn't like that. Who's going to take care of your sister? She raged. Eventually, her wrath forced me to give up Los Angeles, and I took a gap year, really an intense year. Keeping up academically while caring for my sister was a real struggle. A year later, I entered a university in New York and commuted from home. By then, my path was already set. After graduating, I was supposed to join her company. At the time, I felt no dissatisfaction. I was happy to be recognized by her. I thought she finally needed me, not just my sister. Then, to be even more useful to her, I brought along 2 talented classmates when I joined her company. We were researchers. Initially, the job was fun thanks to friendly colleagues, but her demands knew no bounds, and the challenges kept piling up. I regret involving my friends in such a draining emotional endeavor. And these friends were the ones who helped me see the light during a summer vacation in our 5th year. Working and vacationing together, how much more together can we get? We were enjoying a brief vacation at a resort. Well, that just shows how well we get along. Then one of my friends received a call. She laughed openly while chatting. Sorry, it was my mom. You get along well, huh? You think so? It's normal, huh? She asked me to buy some famous local lotion. Oh. Isn't that what we saw in town today? Right. But it was sold out, wasn't it? Yeah. But maybe the store has more stock if we ask. No need to go that far. It's okay, I'll just tell Mom it was sold out. What? No. You were asked to get it, right? Yes. Then we absolutely have to find it. My friend stared at me intently as I insisted. You know, Judy, a mother is family. Yes, that's true. She's not a customer. That's right. If something she asked for isn't available, just saying it wasn't there is enough because she's family. I found myself at a loss for words. Not because I agreed with my friend, but because I was worried that her mother would be furious if she couldn't get the lotion. After the trip, she asked me to come over to her house, and what I saw there was a family dynamic I had never witnessed before. Mom, sorry, the lotion you wanted was sold out. Oh, is that so? It must be really popular then. You really have an eye for good things, Mom. Here we go, the Foresight Declaration. Here, this is a gift for you. Oh. Sweets? Thank you, let's eat some right away. I'll make some coffee. Thanks. Please do. As my friend went to the kitchen, her mother smiled warmly at me. How is she doing at work? She's very talented and doing well in a crucial role. Oh, that's good. She really does work hard when it matters. Talking about her friend seemed to make her very happy. About the lotion. I'm sorry we couldn't get it. Nonsense. That's okay. There will be other chances. We'll try again when it's less popular. If it had been my mother, she would have screamed until I got it. If it had been my mother, she would never let it go. To think there are such generous mothers out there. My mother is a demon. After that, my friends invited me over to their homes several times, and I was finally able to fully awaken from my mother's brainwashing. They never spoke ill of my mother, but they must have had their reasons. They were desperate to rescue me. I'm grateful to have such good friends. Time passed, and when my sister graduated from university, it was time for me to part ways with my mother. That day, I was called into the CEO's office, where my sister also appeared. "You can quit the company now." As soon as I entered the CEO's office, my mother blurted out. I didn't know how to react. "What are you standing there dumbfounded for?" I said you could quit. "What? Sister is fired." "Yes, that's right. Because she's no longer needed." "Why?" "Why? Because you have graduated from university, huh? Mia, you are talented, with a cute face. You are perfect for the presidency. Yay. I'll do it. Oh, but there's a condition. Say anything you want." "What will happen to you, Mom, if I become president?" "I'm thinking of becoming the chairman. I'll be there to advise you." "Huh, then I won't do it. I don't want to be dictated. If you give all the authority to Mia, then I'll consider it." "Mia, you really do take after me." My mother seemed very pleased. "All right, I'll leave everything to reliable Mia. But if you ever have any trouble, I'll be there to support you. Just let me know." "Okay." While Mia and my mother chatted amicably, I quietly observed them. Then, turning to face me, my mother scowled. "Oh, you're still here? I'm handing over the company to adorable Mia. I've always hated you, you know." "Really? Such an ugly one you are. I haven't forgotten how you shamelessly followed your father. You're now fired. Pack your stuff and get out now." Although I'm free from her brainwashing, facing such harsh words is still painful. "Mom." Call me Ms. Baker, not Mom. "Mom." Really, you're such an inflexible child. I could never forgive you for betraying Dad, but I'm grateful for the upbringing. Yet, I was just a convenient tool for you. Don't talk with that face. I'm sick of your face. Such an ugly child. I clenched my lips tightly. I refuse to lose. I won't shed a tear. You're right. Mom, you hated this face so much, so you've changed your own face. Are you satisfied with that face? You are completely different now, and it's unrecognizable. No matter how much you change your face, Mom, it's still ugly. That's not true. Nowadays, as long as you have the money, you can change your face as much as you want. But still, it's the same. The face you show me has never changed from a long time ago. A hideous, demon-like face. You're so annoying. Just get out already. You're no longer needed. Really terrible, both your face and your personality. Mom, are you done yet? I'm getting bored of this. Oh, right, sorry. There's a lot I need to teach you, Mia. Hurry up already. All right, here. Judy, you just get out. I got it. Thank you for everything until now. I had worked diligently at my mother's company, but without any appreciation, I was abruptly fired. And at the same time as my dismissal, I was thrown out of the house, leading to my current situation. 3 months since the firing, I feel at peace living without my mother. However, there are still things I need to do. 3 months have passed, and I'm ready. This will finally free me from my mother. That day, I went to the company from which I was fired. Judy, sorry. It took quite some time. Entering the CEO's office, my sister Mia wore a wry smile. Hee, I've had a nice 3-month break, so it's all fine. Really? Then, I'm counting on you this afternoon as we have discussed. During the afternoon's emergency meeting, it was announced that I would be listed as a director. However, there was only one person surprised by this, the person who had been my mother's secretary. She now works under my sister, the new president. She rushed out of the meeting room in a panic when the announcement was made. So, everyone. As I mentioned before, I'm grateful that my talented sister has come back, so please continue to support us. Talented, really, even though this is a company. What a sweet gesture by such a cute sister. Mia had been planning this for a long time to save me. Yes, to take the company from our mother and run it together as sisters. And she noticed how the employees were being pushed around by our mother's arrogance. It's unbelievable that a daughter who just graduated became the new president and the other daughter was unjustly fired after having been working in research. Understanding this, Mia personally spoke to each employee and asked for their cooperation, promising to bring me back. Those who helped included my friends from research. The employees who understood warmly welcomed my new role as a director. Sandra stormed out, didn't she? She's probably calling that woman right now. Hilarious. Returning to the CEO's office, Mia seemed thoroughly pleased with herself. I hope Sandra quits the company too. Honestly, she's like her clone. I can't stand her. Thanks, Mia. Good job. Likewise, looking forward to working together. Yeah, thank you, as always. Huh? Even when I was being fired, you subtly stepped in between that woman and me. You did the same at home too. Thank you, Mia. Huh? I don't remember that. When we were immersed in her kindness, suddenly, the door to the CEO's office burst open. Hey. Mia. What's the meaning of this? Sandra is quite a capable secretary, always quick to make contact. What's wrong? Why? Why is this person a director? That's because she's talented and respected, obviously. Look, I'm just a newbie. Running a company alone is impossible. That's why I was supposed to become the chairman. No, we don't need that. Mia. I worked so hard for you, and I really tried my best for you. Are you going to repay my kindness with betrayal? I hate you. I really hate you. My sister, who had been smiling, suddenly showed her anger. The one who really looked after me was Judy. You don't know, huh? I've been bullied all along. They said I was the child born from an affair without a father. When I was being bullied, Judy was the one who shielded me. Even though I changed her life, she always stayed by my side. She took care of me as her cute sister. What did you ever do for such a kind Judy? Have you ever apologized even once for your mistakes? Is a pretty face all that matters? Aren't you foolish? You should have cherished your kind-hearted daughter who stayed by your side despite the horrible things you did to her. You're not needed in our lives. Get out of here right now. Mia's words greatly stirred my emotions. I might not be able to hold back tears. Our mother stood dumbfounded in front of us, her gaze fixed on me. Did you instigate this? That's right, isn't it? She is beyond saving. I didn't do anything like that. You're taking everything from me, that man. Mia, the company, everything. Such a hateful child. You've always been a paragon of justice, just like that man. He wouldn't forgive even one mistake I made. How narrow-minded. That's why he died young. Absolutely. It must be. You're mistaken if you think you can get by on justice alone in this world. I don't think so. I believe that justice will prevail. Mom. I hate you too. We're really family, we have the same way of thinking. I held back my tears as I uttered these final words. Sandra supported the dazed mother as they left the CEO's office. That was the last time I saw them. Despite my mother's claim that justice alone doesn't work, 3 years later, the company is still performing well. Unexpectedly, since the new management took over, the employee turnover rate has significantly dropped. This is indeed a cause for celebration. Since then, Mia and I have had no contact with our mother. We live together and manage the company. Although Mia is 13 years younger, she listens attentively to the staff and works diligently every day. Our lives are still long ahead of us. Together with my sister, I want to continue protecting our company. You're not related by blood, so I'm cutting ties. The property is all mine. On a cold winter day, my husband suddenly passed away. During his funeral, I was shaken by the sudden words of my stepson. I thought I had raised him dearly. Even though our relationship wasn't the best, I believed there was some affection reaching him. His words at the funeral made me give up on everything. So, I understand, that's truly how you feel. I vowed not to get involved with my stepson anymore. However, the one who broke that promise and contacted me was him. The next day, my son called dozens of times, but I ignored all of them. See, he did contact me. Yes, I knew this would happen because I knew the truth. Wake up. Come on. How many times do I have to turn off the alarm? The snooze function is useless. Sorry. I'm just not good in the mornings. Hurry and get ready. Breakfast is ready. Yes, I'm still tired. My day begins with handling my morning weak husband. It's a hectic daily life, but it's happy. Phew, it'd be nice if you woke up easier. I need coffee to wake up, and I have to work hard today. There's no time. But eat without rushing. I know. Married for 15 years, this interaction is normal. The comfort of these casual exchanges motivates me to keep going today. Is he still sleeping? I called out to him, but no response. He refers to my son, who is my husband's child from a previous relationship. At 45, living with my 50-year-old self-employed husband and 23-year-old stepson. I support my busy husband by keeping the house as a homemaker. Really? That's frustrating. What should we do? There's a certain tension only during this conversation. I was desperate to ease the atmosphere. Look at the clock. It's this late already. I'm off. You seem busier lately, but please don't overdo it. My husband is very kind, but there are things he keeps to himself or struggles to express, so I try to notice even the slightest changes. Don't worry, I won't overdo it. I don't have time to break down. See you. Though it felt somewhat forced. I didn't want to nag too much and sent him off with a smile. Take care. I was comforted by my kind and cheerful husband from the morning. Now, I must get on with the chores. As I was gearing up, my stepson came stumbling in, still half asleep. I closed my eyes to his unkempt look and greeted him with a smile. Good morning. Breakfast? Should we air out the blankets since it's nice weather? Sigh. As I tried to start a conversation, he intentionally let out a big sigh. It sounded more like he was pressing me not to talk to him. After 15 years, the interaction was still awkward, or rather, it didn't feel like an interaction at all. I wondered if I was being too reserved. Make sure to hydrate. You lose a lot of water while you sleep. I threw out almost nagging words, hoping for some response, but it didn't go well. I tried to speak without letting on that I was choosing my words. I just wanted to talk, but it never worked out. Ignoring was a daily occurrence. And he would glare at me as I kept asking questions. At least he wasn't shouting or rampaging, I told myself. Trying to console myself that it could be worse, but I eventually lost the words to speak. He rummaged through the fridge, grabbed a drink and a sweet bun, and went back to his room. In the end, we didn't exchange a word. Today was no good either. The distance between me and my stepson kept growing over the years. Considering his age and all, I was sorting through various emotions, while suddenly reminiscing about the past. When we got married, my stepson was 7. And I was very confused about how to interact with him. Becoming the parent of a 7-year-old all of a sudden was, in a sense, terrifying. I think my stepson felt the same. Becoming a family with a woman he hardly knew. We had met several times before the marriage, but he never got used to me. And we relied on my husband's suggestion that it would be okay to gradually get used to each other after the marriage. It must have been a huge burden for a child. I struggled not to act too parental, hoping to break the ice. Sometimes, I think this unnaturalness created a gap. Hey, why don't you talk a bit? We can't have fun conversations if you don't say anything. It's okay not to call me mom. Let's get along. Well, it's understandable. It's a shock to suddenly have more family. Let's get along slowly, the 3 of us. Right? My husband said this, looking apologetic toward me. It was tough not having the stepson warm up to me. But I knew worrying wouldn't help. So I did my best to close the gap and get him used to me, supported by my husband. Shall we play together? What do you like? I want Dad. Only Dad. I'd like to play together, but Dad is busy with work, right? No. Go away. Ball. So, let's play soccer. You're not capable anyway. Get out of here. I didn't know what to do, and I told myself not to act like a mother, while I was overwhelmed with the unfamiliar task of parenting. There were times when I thought it was growth just to have him talk back, a carefree idea. As time passed, I hoped things would work out as he grew. But life doesn't always go smoothly. I was naive. As he became a middle and high school student, not quite a delinquent. But he hung around every day without studying much. And my husband and I were at our wits' end. Even my kind husband raised his voice sometimes. Where have you been until this time? Shut up. You're not really worried. What I do is none of your business. Not our business. How can you say that? Why can't you at least tell us where you are? But there are social commitments for young people, right? If we keep allowing that, there's no end to it. Making us worry without any contact and then talking back to us. Clicking your tongue. I'm getting frustrated. Well, my bad for being such a son. Bang. I can't forget the sound of the door slamming that time. Nor can I forget how pitiful I felt for only being able to respond in such a templated manner. Should I have scolded him properly? Even if I thought so, I couldn't easily change my way of thinking. Despite various troubles, my feelings of caring for my stepson remained unchanged. And I, ever hopeful, waited with a birthday cake I made for him. Tick-tock, tick-tock. I somewhat knew it would turn out this way. But if there was even a slight hope, maybe. I clung to that faint hope and continued to wait. It's already this late, maybe he got involved in something dangerous. It's always like this. I'm truly sorry. You're making such an effort. I just got too excited, don't worry about it. What I'm really worried about is whether he's safe. Despite thinking it might be annoying, I was too worried and made a call. Ring, ring, ring. Of course, he's not answering the phone. I called several times, but eventually, it went to voicemail. He's old enough to prefer spending time with friends over celebrating with family. Which is natural. I should have realized it sooner. Let's eat the cake tomorrow. Ah. My husband sighed deeply and said nothing more. In the end, my stepson didn't come home and was out all night. Since then, the gap has not been filled, in fact, it has only widened. There were many troubles. Just thinking about it drains me. Despite being disliked, I lived my life trying to be as close to my stepson as possible, hoping we could gradually get along. I cherished raising him in my own way. On another cold winter day, my husband suddenly died. Ah, that. The cause was a myocardial infarction. Likely compounded by his usual overwork and stress, I was told by the doctor. Although I was confused, I understood that his work situation was severe. And there were parts one could accept. If only I had been more supportive. I regretted not being able to support him more. Without time to grieve, I arranged my husband's funeral. Keeping busy helped distract me a bit. The funeral proceeded without any issues. And I barely kept myself together as the chief mourner. I had to be strong. I couldn't just keep grieving, for the sake of my stepson left behind. I kept telling myself that. Everybody, I have a few words to say. My husband was a very kind and cheerful man. Despite his life still having so much potential, he unfortunately fell ill suddenly and closed the curtain on his life. I never thought I'd have to undertake such a duty so soon. I continued my speech with these thoughts in my heart. A good husband and father, he cherished his family despite being busy. And he spent time with us. I want to live on, supporting each other with my son. Holding on to the happiness my husband gave us. Thank you all for coming today, despite your busy schedules. As I finished my speech as the chief mourner, suddenly, my stepson started to speak. I couldn't comprehend what was happening, as it was so sudden. I'm cutting ties with her. This person is no longer a parent or anything to me. A stranger. Pointing at me, my stepson declared that. Wait. What are you saying? Shut up. Be quiet. I was at a loss for words at my stepson's shocking announcement. To sever ties suddenly, and at such an occasion. I tried to stay calm. But it was impossible to remain composed. And I felt like I might collapse from the psychological strain. Regardless of my state, my stepson continued speaking indifferently. Dad never cared about her. He didn't acknowledge her as his wife. Only saw her as a mere housekeeper. She's not family. The surrounding crowd couldn't hide their murmurs. I was shaken by the words that my husband didn't care for me. But that quickly turned into anger. I retorted sharply. That's not true. Dad cared for and cherished me properly. What were you looking at? Both you and I were cherished by him. Dad wasn't the person you describe. Hearing this, my stepson half mocked me with a smile. And pulled a paper from his breast pocket. Can you still say such platitudes after seeing this? I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw the paper. This is your marriage certificate with Dad. Dad never submitted this. This is the definitive proof that he didn't care about you. You're the one who doesn't know anything about Dad, aren't you? No way. If you doubt it, check it yourself. Saying that, he threw the paper at me. I hesitantly picked it up and verified it. It was indeed the marriage certificate my husband and I had filled out. Just as my stepson said. I couldn't stop shivering. Not from anger, but from a surge of sadness. We weren't married. Just as my stepson said, I had always been a stranger to my husband. My emotions were a mess, and I couldn't think straight. That's why I'm cutting ties with you. The property is all mine. Well, you're not family or anything, are you? You can't say anything back, can you? As I stood pale and trembling, my stepson cornered me as if seizing the moment. I've never liked you. I tolerated you because I thought you were just a housekeeper necessary for my father's work. But I'm done with this charade. I feel relieved. Now get out of my sight. I thought I had raised him well. Even if not as a mother. I believed he had accepted me as part of the family. Learning what was truly in his heart, I felt despair. Was I really never connected to my husband or stepson? My heart fell so much during the funeral that I forgot we were at one. I gave up on everything in despair. Was love this fragile? Or was our family nothing more than a pretense? At that moment, I couldn't think of anything else. I understand. I don't want anything, and I will no longer have anything to do with you. I vowed never to interact with my stepson again. If freeing myself from this shredded mess of feelings meant letting everything else go, so be it. Thank you for your efforts, housekeeper. Days after the shocking funeral, I was tidying up the house, preparing to leave it behind. I wanted to free myself from this situation as soon as possible. Was my entire married life a lie? I muttered alone in the now empty and somewhat lonely room. That's when it happened. I found a letter in my husband's study. A letter, for me? Wanting to erase everything, I hesitated for a moment about whether to read it. But fearing regret, I started to read the letter, which contained all my husband's feelings. So that was it. With surprise, the letter dissolved all the resentments in my heart. And I cried while holding it. It was the moment everything made sense. I finally understood why my husband hadn't submitted our marriage certificate. Understanding everything, I felt pathetic for having taken my stepson's words at face value and despaired over such a piece of paper without fully trusting my husband until the end. A week later, I moved out of the house I had lived in with my husband. It was sad to leave the home where we shared so many ups and downs. But part of me felt refreshed to be free from that stepson who trampled all over the love I had given. I never wanted to deal with someone who couldn't even understand his own father properly. Well, he's a stranger now. So there shouldn't be any more interaction, I thought. However, the next day, I saw an unbelievable number of calls from my stepson. He must have learned the truth. After all that bravado, to contact me so easily. I felt both astonished and somewhat refreshed. Ignoring dozens of calls, I realized it was all pointless. The name of my stepson kept appearing on my phone to an annoying extent. I should have quickly deleted his number and blocked him. Though I thought there would be no more interactions, knowing my stepson. He might overturn any situation if it suited him. His predictable actions were almost amusing. Even after declaring he would cut ties, he contacts me this insistently. Because the situation has changed. How ridiculous. I muttered to my continuously ringing phone. My stepson wouldn't give up. Why couldn't he use this persistence for something else? He must live a life depending on others. No matter how many times he called, I had no intention of answering. Full of anger and anxiety, he must be overwhelmed. But that had nothing to do with me. He chose to be a stranger to me. What could he possibly want from me now? No matter what he said or did, My feelings wouldn't waver anymore. Ignoring the incessant ringing of the phone felt good. I felt cruel enough to not want to be on my bad side. I realized how much a person could dismiss others. Finally, the phone stopped ringing abruptly. He gave up. Seriously, what a nuisance. Relieved that the nuisance calls had ended, my peace was short-lived. An hour later, I was about to have an unwanted reunion. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. No way. But it was exactly that. The house chime was frantically pressed. And as I peered through the door viewer, there stood my stepson with a demonic expression. Wow, he can really go this far. Impressive action in a way. Hey. I know you're there. Open up. His voice betrayed his panic even though he was shouting. You're hiding something. What's going on? Ding dong. Ding dong. Bang. Bang. He even started banging on the door. Such a nuisance. His behavior was like a debt collector's, desperately cornered. But it had nothing to do with me. I didn't want to involve myself. Bang. Bang. I'll break the door down. Open up, hey. Dealing with him was a hassle, but I opened the door, fearing a neighbor might call the police. As soon as I cracked the door, a hand appeared in the gap, pushing it open forcefully. Why didn't you answer the phone? How could you not notice after so many calls? How dull are your senses? This was his opening line upon seeing me. Listening further was unpleasant. I could go on and on with complaints, and I was quite irritated. But losing my composure would make me no better than my stepson. I spoke calmly. What? What do you want? What could a stranger possibly want? I asked with a hint of sarcasm, feeling no sympathy anymore. It's not just about what. You knew everything, didn't you? You hid it all. And you still call yourself a parent? That's the lowest. What? Parent? What convenient talk. He can't take responsibility for his own words. Did he forget how he insulted me in front of everyone and declared I wasn't a parent? I couldn't understand a person like my stepson. Stop being silent. You put me through this. He came at me with childish words and a fierce demeanor. His face so desperate it almost evoked pity. Of course, I knew what he was talking about, but I decided to play dumb. It felt like a waste to engage with him seriously. I don't understand what you want to say. What about that thing? And who are you calling a parent? I don't have any children. I continued to provoke him as he glared at me, grinding his teeth. Actually, I might have had a son once, but that must have been my misunderstanding. So I don't have any children. And I really don't understand what you're trying to say. Sorry. I intended to remain calm. But I realized I might have spoken in a rather childish manner. This was still rather mild, though. Don't play dumb. You knew Dad had a huge debt. How can you act so clueless? There's no way you didn't know something that major about your own spouse. It's truly despicable of you to ignore your own son who is in such trouble. Just because it's inconvenient for you. Which mouth is spewing such nonsense? The desperation on my stepson's face and the absurdity of his accusations were so ridiculous that it was hard to keep from laughing. Of course, I knew about my husband's debt. But this immature retaliation only fueled my anger further. Marriage? You were the one who said I was just a housekeeper and not a parent, right? I was just a housekeeper. A housekeeper doesn't know such things. Too bad. Don't be defiant. What are you talking about? Explain yourself properly. Dealing with my unrelenting stepson was exhausting. Continuing to argue would only lead to an endless back and forth. Wanting to get rid of him quickly, I sighed and reluctantly decided to explain. My husband was self-employed and his business was doing well. We lived a relatively affluent life. Slowly, I told my stepson the truth, as he couldn't believe there was such a large debt. Your father became a guarantor for a friend who was starting a business. But that person vanished, leaving behind a huge debt. Since that person became unreachable, your father had no choice but to pay back the enormous debt. What? A guarantor? That's none of my business. And you knew about it and kept quiet? Don't mess with me. I continued my explanation unfazed. Your father was a kind man. I wish he had been less trusting of others. He knew his nature might get him into trouble someday. That's why he didn't register our marriage officially. To ensure I wouldn't be burdened if something happened. We were supposed to share these responsibilities as a married couple. What a load of nonsense. Do you expect me to believe that? Why do I have to clean up this mess? You handle it. No matter what I said, my stepson wouldn't accept it. Reluctantly, I showed him a letter from my husband. Upon reading the letter, my stepson started shaking violently. Damn it. Fix this. He kept repeating the same words, acting like a child throwing a tantrum. And I had no inclination to reach out to him. If it hadn't been for that day at the funeral, even knowing this truth might have made me want to support him. That's the situation, so please go home. There's nothing more to say to a stranger. Thank you for your efforts. I returned the words my stepson had hurled at me during the funeral. I won't accept this. Didn't you hear? You and I are strangers. If you don't stop, I'll report you to the police for harassment and extortion. It seemed my seriousness finally got through to him, and he grumbled as he left. The exhaustion felt like it was years in the making. But my spirit was surprisingly clear. Thanks to my husband's love, I had managed to fend off the devil. My husband, knowing something might happen to him, had made a gift of his assets to me in my own account, ensuring I had a considerable fortune. This ordeal made me feel the love my husband had for me. It taught me that a marriage certificate was just a piece of paper. What truly matters between people is the time and memories shared. The time I spent with my husband is my most precious treasure. Thank you. My heart finally found peace. Meanwhile, my stepson, having inherited all of my husband's property, also took on the massive debt and ended up having to sell the house and everything else, leading to a life of penury. This was probably because he never made any effort and didn't engage with people properly. Later, he apparently went begging to my husband's relatives for money. But of course, they wanted nothing to do with him. Originally, my stepson had relied on our family's wealth and dropped out of college, never seriously looking for a job and only working odd jobs occasionally. Now, it seems he's living day to day. Well, it's no longer my concern. I vowed to live the rest of my life cherishing the memories with my husband, who had cherished me, not splurging but living meaningfully. My name is Rachel. I'm 42 and work at a trading company. I have a precious fiancé now, and ever since I was young, My late father told me to study Spanish because it would become essential. I attended a Spanish language school and watched foreign dramas at home to become familiar with the language. In middle and high school, I was always the top student in Spanish. When I was in high school, my father passed away, leaving my mother, my younger sister Kelly, and me in a financially tight situation. I almost gave up on going to university, but my mother encouraged me, saying, "Rachel, your Spanish skills are top-notch, so you should work at a big company where you can use them as a weapon. I'll figure out the tuition, so make sure you go to college." Thanks to her support, I was able to pass the difficult Ivy League of Foreign Studies and now work at a major trading company. I always thought I should never forget the kindness my parents showed me. However, after my father passed away, my mother overly doted on Kelly, who is 10 years younger than me. When I got accepted to university, she was a little happy, but she didn't show much interest when I got a job. And she didn't seem to appreciate that it was in trading. More importantly, when I graduated from university, Kelly was still a 12-year-old elementary school student. My mother kept buying her things and praising her, enamored by Kelly's natural charm. I never received anything for my birthday, but she kept buying things for Kelly. This made me feel a strange jealousy at times. Whenever I tried to be affectionate with my mother, she would say, "Rachel, you are Kelly's big sister, so you need to be more responsible. You're supposed to be a role model for her," putting pressure on me. As soon as I started university, I began living alone. I was motivated by the favor of being sent to university and the pressure of being the eldest daughter. I wanted to live independently and contribute even a little to my mother and sister's living expenses. So I worked part-time during college, saved up. I deposited $300 from my salary into my mother's bank account every month, and $500 when I received bonuses. In my first year, I managed to put in a total of $4,000, even though I was living very frugally. However, my mother and sister never thanked me. They acted as if it was only natural for the eldest daughter to contribute that much. As I received raises over the years, I tried to gradually increase the amount I sent home. I rarely called home, and only occasionally received a little contact from my mother. I felt a growing distance between us. Even when I returned home occasionally, I didn't stay long. Time passed, and Kelly graduated from high school. Then, suddenly, my mother called me. "This time, Kelly is going to college, and I need a little more help from you." "I'm already sending money every month, aren't I?" "Well, yes. But that alone isn't enough. You went to an Ivy League of Foreign Studies. But Kelly is going to a private women's college. It's going to cost more. How much more should I add? Let's see. You're putting in $500 a month now, so I'd like 3 times that." 3 times, as in $1,500? That's impossible. Do you know how much I make? Oh, no, I mean, could you double it? $1,000? That's still tough. How about $800? That might be possible. Thank you for helping. I wanted to help my struggling mother. So I immediately deposited the money into the bank after payday. I owe a debt of gratitude for being allowed to go to college. If it helps them live better, then it's a small price to pay. However, about $10,000 a year was quite tough for me. The amount I could save became minimal, so I started doing freelance work at home. From my first job to now, about 20 years later, I've been sending money home. I don't want to talk about the total amount. As time went by, I turned 42. My mother called me again. I had a bad feeling. Next time, Kelly is getting married. Oh, that's great. I've been dating someone for the past 2 years. Well, never mind about you. Kelly is 32, right? So, we need money for her wedding costs. My mother cut me off. She wasn't interested in my life. Kelly always comes first. So, for the wedding and the honeymoon, could you help us out financially? Mom? I've been sending money home all this time, haven't I? I even increased the amount when Kelly entered a private university. Shouldn't that have added up to a significant amount by now? University. Oh, yes, that happened. I can't even save much anymore. I'm 42 now. Can't you manage somehow over there? It's really too much for me. Please, I just need a solid amount of money right now. How much do you need? Maybe $10,000? That's impossible. Oh, no, not that. $5,000 would be fine. You say $5,000 so easily, but besides the monthly support, you need that much for a wedding? Is Kelly there? Let me talk to her on the phone. Then, my mother yelled at me. You don't understand anything. I won't ask you for anything anymore. There's no need to let Kelly talk. Do you know? Recently, she's been sending us $2,000. We've been living on that. You should be grateful to your sister. My mother hung up abruptly. I didn't understand what she meant by all this. It's fine to arrange money for a happy occasion. But why did she start with asking for $10,000, then change it to $5,000? When I said it was difficult, and then refused to let Kelly talk, claiming she's been sending $2,000? If that amount of money was available, they should have been able to manage just fine. And then to tell me to be grateful to my sister? It all seemed too incoherent. I had been sending money home for 20 years, fluctuating in amount, but consistently supporting my mother ever since Kelly went to college. Initially, she asked for $1,500 a month, which we settled at $800. When I said it was too much. This time, it dropped from $10,000 to $5,000 abruptly. Finding it all too strange, I contacted my fiancé, who suggested that I might be being deceived. It was a matter related to money, so a suggestion was made. 2 months later, various truths came to light. I learned the facts about my mother and sister and trembled with anger. Then I made 2 resolutions and decided to head to my parents' house unexpectedly. While on the train home, my phone rang with a call from my mother as soon as I reached the station near our home. I decided to answer. Rachel, you haven't sent any money for 3 months now. What's this about? I thought maybe it wasn't needed anymore, so I stopped. I need you to act responsibly. Send the 3 months' worth right now. What about Kelly? Kelly, she's about to have a wedding planning meeting. Oh, the wedding, huh? What kind of person is her husband? He's an heir to a major trading company. So, you see, she's been getting a proper allowance recently, right? $2,000 a month. Then she's set for the future, and all the more reason my support isn't needed. I'm a bit busy right now, so I'll hang up. We'll talk later. Wait, Rachel. I hung up unilaterally. My mother tried calling several times after that, but I ignored her. When I arrived in front of the family home, my mother and sister came out dressed casually. I followed them discreetly and, though I knew it, They entered a casino near the station. After about 2 hours, they came out looking pale and sighed together. I approached them from behind. Mom, Kelly. Did you enjoy planning the wedding? What? Rachel? Rachel. They were both very surprised to see me suddenly. What are you talking about? Wedding planning? Just. Kelly, what are you saying? We chose a wonderful venue together, didn't we? What? Mom, what are you talking about? I'm not getting married. Kelly, you know what's going on. Choosing the venue is important. Their stories were so inconsistent, it was full of holes. I continued. Wow, so wedding planning meetings these days are done in such casual sweatpants? Is Kelly's fiancé also dressed like that? That's because I'm not getting married. That would be impossible, right? Since there's no fiancé. Mom was saying he's the heir to a major trading firm. Mom, what are you talking about? Well. Recently, I heard Kelly has been sending $2,000 a month to you, Mom. That's impressive. How does she manage such a large amount? It's definitely impossible for me. If I had that kind of money, I'd spend it on something else. Right? I would do the same. It seemed my mother and sister hadn't coordinated their stories well. This was a trap my mother had set for me all by herself. Kelly? About the wedding planning, no, the casino planning, was it fun? Playing slots is fun, but it's been terrible recently. I just lost big time again. Right. As Mom says, choosing the venue is important, right? For slots. Absolutely. Picking the right parlor is crucial. It's no good in the middle of the day. You have to line up first thing in the morning. Ahahaha. As I continued to talk to my sister, more and more discrepancies emerged from my mother. She seemed to be scrambling for excuses, but she couldn't come up with anything coherent. All she could do was give a forced smile. So, Kelly, which private university did you go to? I'm not as smart as you, so I went straight to work after high school. But that didn't last long. I've been sending more money because Mom said you. We're going to a private women's college, Women's University. A girl with my grades couldn't possibly attend such a fancy women's college. That's right. It's good you're still so natural. What's going on, Mom? What could be going on? My mother had gambled away all the money I sent. Gambling, naturally, involves wins and losses. There may be times when she won, but mostly, they were losses. Casino, in particular, is designed so that about 10% of people win. That means 90% lose. My mother and sister, having turned into gambling addicts, had lost their ability to make rational decisions, and were nearly at the point of mental breakdown. Mom, here, this is for you. A souvenir. What is it? This envelope? Is it a bundle of money? That's so generous. What are you talking about? It's a record of your actions for the past 3 months. Record of actions? My mother and sister intensely examined the contents of the envelope. It was filled with photos showing just how much they had been indulging in casino over the last 3 months. My fiancé's suggestion was to hire a private detective. They frequented the casino parlors almost daily, winning a little only to lose a lot. They had even started borrowing from payday loan services. Mom? If you and Kelly were planning to scam money from me, you should have coordinated your story better. By now, Kelly has told me almost everything, and it was all too sloppy. I was grateful for being sent to the Ivy League of Foreign Studies, knowing full well that it was all paid for with the inheritance Dad left us. I felt indebted to both you and Dad, which is why I kept sending money, never imagining it was being used this way. You've deceived me for 20 years. Rachel. I'm sorry. I'll stop playing slots, I can't win anymore. Please, forgive me. Me too. You're all I have, big sister. Slot is fun, but I'll quit. Why don't you two get serious jobs? So, if we get serious jobs, will you start sending money again? What? I was astonished by their response even now. You'll send us money, right? Otherwise, we can't get out of this cycle of debt. If you say you won't send money, I'll come to your house to take it. Surely our kind big sister will help us. We're family, after all. That's impossible. What? Pedro, come here. I called over my fiancé, who had been waiting nearby. Hello. Who is this? This is Carlos, his nickname is Los. We met at the company. And we just got married recently. I was going to introduce him to you, Mom and Kelly, but well, it turned out like this. I think this is enough. Los is very clear about yes and no, and he says he can't be family with people who are dishonest about money, so at the same time as introducing him, we've come to cut ties with you. How can you decide such a thing on your own? Los, please tell them in English. With a smile, my fiancé Carlos explained to my mother and sister. Ending ties with money is ending ties with us. This is common in the world. The end. My mother and sister listened with their mouths agape. What is he saying? If you don't understand, look it up in a dictionary. Bye then. Wait, Rachel. Rachel. Carlos and I caught a taxi and left the scene. For me, it was a final tour of the local sites. Carlos was delighted. After thoroughly enjoying our sightseeing, we took the train back. My estranged mother and sister ended up selling the house. My father left to pay off debts. But the property value was too low to sustain a decent living. They moved into a shabby apartment and tried to get by with part-time jobs. But their gambling habits didn't fade, accelerating their cycle of debt. It was an incurable disease. My husband Carlos, an executive at the trading company I work for, had finished his assignment in America and was finally taking me back to his native Spain. I had always dreamed of living abroad, though I converse with my husband using a mix of English and Spanish. When meeting people in Spain, it's purely in Spanish. The Spanish I learned is different in pronunciation from the Queen's Spanish spoken in Spain, akin to the difference between standard and countryside. Carlos had often pointed this out before we married, but he now says it has improved greatly. Language is indeed deep. Without the monthly remittances, I was able to save. I still work at the company while dealing with American clients through. Fortunately, my husband detests gambling. Money earned through gambling vanishes as quickly as it comes, he says. Money earned through hard work is clean money, which anyone would use carefully. Carlos and I share similar values about money, like turtles. We save steadily and avoid wasteful spending. In today's uncertain world, you never know when you might need a substantial amount of money. For my happiness and for my family, I plan to treasure clean money even more. Please do something. I cried out, tears streaming down my face. But my mother-in-law and husband just ignored me. Covered in blood. They seemed more worried about the dog that bit me, and whether the floor was stained, than about me. Left with no choice, I called an ambulance myself and was transported alone. In the ambulance, I couldn't stop crying. During the transport, my husband called. "Oh, send the ambulance back. Moms." He continued to shout desperately. My name is Sarah Brown, 34 years old. 4 years ago, a friend dragged me to a mixer saying, "There's a gathering with government employees. You're coming, right?" That's where I met my husband, Eric, 7 years my junior. My father is a basketball master and my mother is a PE teacher. Growing up in a family of athletes, with 3 older brothers who are all basketball experts, I developed a somewhat masculine personality. Eric, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. When we first met, his shirt buttons were misaligned, and he stumbled through his toast. A nice guy. Not bad at all, but he seemed to struggle to get things right. I found him adorable, and it tickled my maternal instincts. After several dates, I was the one who suggested we start a relationship. Eric always soothed me. Someone who could get a bit irritable. Eventually, I wanted to be with him forever. On our first anniversary, "I'll take care of you for the rest of our lives. Let's get married." With those bold words, I proposed. Eric, teary-eyed, replied, "Sarah, that's my line. Thanks for everything. Let's keep it up." And we decided to get married. When we visited my parents for the first time, Eric was terrified by my stern father and 3 brothers. "Don't be so scared." "Yes," he replied loudly, but his voice cracked, making the whole family laugh. My father said he might not seem reliable, but he really fretted over the gift. And his love for Sarah is clear, which makes me happy. After greeting my family, it was time to visit Eric's family. According to him, his father had passed away from cancer 5 years ago. Eric's parents had struggled with infertility for many years, finally having Eric after 8 years. I'm usually quite straightforward and rarely get nervous, but I was truly anxious that day. On the way to meet my mother-in-law who lives just 1 station away, I was overwhelmed with worry. What if she doesn't like me? Can I greet her properly? Will she dislike the age difference? Then, my usually unreliable husband reassured me. It's okay. Mom is kind and easy to talk to. She's known as always smiling Mrs. in the neighborhood. Really? That makes me feel a bit better. And nobody could dislike you, Sarah. Eric, thank you. Upon arriving at my mother-in-law's, I rang the doorbell. Nice to meet you. I'm Sarah. Thank you for your time today. Well, you must be Sarah. No need to be so formal. Come in. She greeted me with a warm smile. My mother-in-law was dressed in a beautiful dress and had an elegant and kind demeanor. Despite my concerns about our age difference, she said, "What are you talking about? Age doesn't matter. I'm happy that someone like you is Eric's wife," putting my fears at ease. She reacted positively to everything I said, making for an enjoyable time. The conversation turned to the toy poodle she used to have. Look, isn't it cute? I had it when I was in elementary school. It was a friendly and smart dog, but it passed away due to old age. Reminiscing, my mother-in-law continued, when Eric interjected. Mom, Sarah's not good with dogs. Sarah, you don't like dogs. Yes. Actually, despite my tomboyish nature, I've been terrified of dogs since one bit me. In the park as a child, resulting in stitches and a lifelong trauma. Oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry for bringing up such a topic when you're uncomfortable with dogs. No. It's okay. The poodle in the photo was really cute. I reassured her. Hearing this, my mother-in-law gratefully responded, "Thank you." As our enjoyable time flew by, Eric and I headed home. Your mother is really beautiful and kind, isn't she? Right. Mom is always cheerful and gentle. That's wonderful. We chatted about his mother until Eric suddenly turned serious. Actually, I have something to discuss. Remember we went to my parents' house today? Yes, it was quite a large house. I was surprised. That's right. Dad built it with Mom in mind, considering the layout for easy chores. Even planning children's rooms in case we had kids. We never used them since I'm an only child. Now Mom's living there alone. And it seems too big for her, making her feel lonely. So, how about we live with her? Startled by his sudden suggestion, I widened my eyes. Indeed, the house was lovely and well-maintained, a dream to live in. But we were just newlyweds, perhaps it was too soon to consider living together. After some thought, I said, "Your mother is really nice, and the house is more wonderful than I deserve." Then. But. We just got married, right? I think we'd like to enjoy our newlywed life alone for a while. Yeah. You're right, Sarah. I'll let Mom know. Thanks. I'm sorry to make you explain it to her. I felt a bit guilty, but I didn't want to compromise by going along with something I wasn't ready for. Eric understood, and I felt relieved. Our married life began peacefully, with Eric continuing his clueless yet helpful ways. However, recently something's been bothering me. Hello, Mom? Oh. Got it. I'll come over now. Your mother again. Yeah. The living room light bulb went out. I'll go and replace it. Lately, this had been the norm, whether it was weekdays or weekends. My husband was always rushing back to his parents' house. Whether it was because Mom bought a computer but can't set it up, or Mom overshopped at the supermarket and needs a ride. While I sulked about spending weekends alone, I realized how caring and considerate Eric was towards his mother. A month into our marriage, it was my mother-in-law's birthday. We headed to her house with a present and cake we had picked together. As we entered, a dog suddenly rushed out. What? I exclaimed, startled, as I had not seen a dog there before. Being afraid of dogs, I instinctively hid behind Eric. My mother-in-law then appeared from the living room. Oh, welcome. What's with this dog, Mom? Well, I've been feeling lonely living alone. So I started keeping this little dog recently. Isn't it cute? It was a Welsh Corgi, a small breed. I see. Startled by the dog that suddenly appeared, I managed a forced smile despite my fear. My mother-in-law, unconcerned, said, "Come on, Sarah, hold him." I stepped back a bit and said, I mentioned before when we came for the marriage greeting. But I've been scared of dogs since one bit me when I was younger." I hesitated to hold the dog. "Oh, was that so?" "I didn't know," she feigned ignorance. "And to think he's so cute, what a strange person," she said, her face seemingly smirking. At that moment, I wondered for the first time if my mother-in-law was being sarcastic towards me. Since then, whenever my husband invited me saying, "Mom wants to see Sarah," or "Let's go see Mom," I declined, saying, "I'd love to see your mother, but I'm scared of dogs." I couldn't forget the smirk on my mother-in-law's face when she saw my discomfort. A month later, as usual, I came home from work to find my mother-in-law at our house. "Mom." "Oh, welcome back." As if nothing was out of the ordinary, she walked into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and started cooking. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" "Eric said he wanted to eat my homemade stew, so I came over." Seemingly pleased that her son wanted her cooking, she hummed a tune. "Oh, is that so?" I tried to smile, but my face stiffened with fear. After all, her dog was in the living room. Perhaps she had fed the dog, as the plate licked clean by the dog was one of my favorite antique dishes I had bought at a flea market in France. How could anyone welcome this situation? I went to my room to put away my belongings and outerwear. Alone, I told myself not to get irritated since my mother-in-law had come. Took a deep breath and returned to the living room. That's when I saw the dog had soiled the carpet. "You've got to be kidding." The newly bought carpet was stained yellow. "Mom." The dog, on the carpet. I hurriedly called out to my mother-in-law, but she didn't seem rushed at all. "Oh, did he do that here?" she said nonchalantly. Not scolding the dog or even cleaning up. If left alone, the stain would set in the carpet. So I ended up cleaning it myself. I thought, seriously, what is going on? I was quite frustrated. Then I heard the front door open as my husband came home. The dog, reacting to the noise, barked loudly until Eric entered the living room. Even the barking scared me. Once the dog saw it was Eric, it calmed down, and I was relieved. The three of us sat down to eat my mother-in-law's homemade stew. During the meal, neither my mother-in-law nor my husband put the dog in its cage, so it wandered around our feet as if looking for scraps. My face froze in fear, and my mother-in-law remarked, "Sarah really is scared of dogs, isn't she?" Making such a frightened face. "I brought him along today thinking I'd help you get over your fear." Bringing the dog without asking, using my favorite plate, letting it soil the carpet, and barking, how could this possibly cure my fear of dogs? It only made it worse. I wanted to scream in my mind to put the dog in a cage or somewhere. However, my husband seemed completely unaware of my distress. Mom is so kind, taking such good care of Sarah. I thought, how is this taking good care? It's just pretense, it's actually harassment. And then there's Sarah, completely unacceptable. Shockingly, my husband began lecturing me. Me? What did I do wrong? Mom's been trying so hard, and yet Sarah keeps running away from the dog. And you refuse to visit my parents' house because of it. You're not trying hard enough. My husband, perhaps because his mother was present, started blaming me with an arrogant attitude. I'm sorry. With my mother-in-law there, I had no choice but to apologize, biting my lip in frustration. After that, my mother-in-law frequently brought the dog over. Every time, the dog ran around the house and made messes. But she ignored it, showing no intention of disciplining it. Feeling stressed from these days, I reached my limit one day and pleaded with my mother-in-law. "Please, I've told you many times that I'm scared of dogs. Could you please refrain from bringing the dog over?" Summoning all my courage, I begged. Then suddenly, my mother-in-law's demeanor changed drastically, and she yelled in a high-pitched voice, "I always thought so, Sarah. You're using the dog as an excuse to avoid me. How terrible. I was stunned. I hadn't said anything like that. Even more shocking was my husband joining in. Sarah. That's too much. Mom was thinking of you, and you've been avoiding her. That's rude, apologize to her. I protested. Eric, you and Mom know I'm scared of dogs, right? And yet you keep bringing him over. And every time he makes a mess, I have to clean up. It's too much. My mother-in-law frowned, snorted, and retorted. Just love the dog. You're old anyway. You probably can't even have kids. Is that what you really think? Because it's true. You're already 34. It's getting difficult to get pregnant, right? But my son is still 27. He's still got his future ahead of him. And here you are, a haughty older wife. She began to complain. She had said age didn't matter. I was shocked to learn my mother-in-law's true feelings. I couldn't stand her staying longer and tearing my heart apart. Please never come back, I said, tears filling my eyes. Offended by my words, she retorted, "What an arrogant daughter-in-law," and left with the dog. From that day on, my disdain for my husband and mother-in-law grew. My relationship with my husband, who had defended his mother and blamed me, became strained, and we hardly spoke. One weekend, Eric spoke to me earnestly. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I should have considered your feelings more." Eric. I was relieved, thinking he finally understood my feelings. But then he said, "Let's go apologize to Mom now." What? Why does it turn out this way? Was I wrong that day? It doesn't matter who's wrong. Don't upset Mom. Please, just apologize. Ultimately, he hadn't understood anything. My feelings didn't matter to him. He forcibly took me to his parents' house. When we arrived, my mother-in-law was standing with her hands on her hips, waiting for me. Mom. I'm sorry about that day. Just to appease her, I apologized as my husband had instructed. But then she said, "I'll forgive you if you hold the dog." It was hopeless. This woman was unreasonable. I had apologized even though I wasn't at fault. And I had tried to compromise many times. Yet this was her attitude. "I've told you multiple times, I can't do it," I stated coldly. Then, enraged by my response, my mother-in-law forcibly pushed the dog towards me. In a reflex, I pushed the dog away and screamed, causing the startled dog to bite my hand. Ouch! My hand quickly turned bloody red. Do something, I pleaded with my husband and mother-in-law. However, my mother-in-law only worried about the dog, saying, "Poor thing, got scared by such a loud scream." And my husband was checking if the floor was dirty, showing no concern for my pain. Deeply disgusted by their lack of empathy, my bleeding wouldn't stop. I managed to push the dog away and called an ambulance on my phone. Soon after, the ambulance arrived. How dramatic. It's just a dog bite. My mother-in-law mocked me with a scornful look. Even as the ambulance arrived, my husband remained indifferent and kept checking the floor. Ignoring this terrible mother-son duo, I boarded the ambulance alone, shaking and crying from the pain and frustration. During transport, surprisingly, my husband called. Thinking he might be concerned, I answered, only to hear him say, "My mom. The dog bit her too. You must still be nearby, right? Tell the driver to turn back to the house." Hearing this, my feelings for him cooled completely. I didn't care what happened to his mother. Let them suffer their own consequences. I hung up without a word. At the hospital, the doctors said my wounds were deep enough to require hospitalization. I hadn't brought anything for an extended stay, so I called my parents to bring what I needed. Soon, they arrived at the hospital. Sarah. Are you okay? Sarah. Lying in the hospital bed, they looked at me with concern. I'm sorry for worrying you. It still hurts a bit, but I'm okay for now. That's good. Your dad was really worried. What happened? Well, I explained everything about my mother-in-law and husband's behavior. My mother embraced me, saying, "You've done well." Just sharing my troubles felt like a weight lifted from my shoulders, as I felt alone all this time. My father, however, was furious. I won't forgive them. The next day, my husband called, furious. What the hell? Suddenly, the police showed up at the house. And they're interrogating my mom. I don't know. Maybe the hospital reported it? They asked why I was injured. And I told them your mom's dog did it. What? What if mom gets arrested? It's your fault for being careless. Yeah, I knew you'd say something like that. But it doesn't matter, I wanted to tell you something. Let's get a divorce. What? We've only been married for 6 months. It'll be embarrassing. Our relatives and coworkers will laugh. I won't agree to a divorce. He hung up abruptly. A week after being discharged, with my parents' support, I went to a lawyer to discuss divorce and seek compensation. Despite multiple calls from my husband, which I ignored, he sent a message saying, "I'm at a cafe near your parents' house. Come here." He probably didn't want to confront my parents. Reluctantly, I went to the cafe. "I'm not agreeing to a divorce." That was his opening line. Well, I'm not asking for your opinion. I want a divorce. I don't want to be with you or your mother anymore. Don't speak ill of my mother. It's your fault, isn't it? You say you're scared of dogs and avoid my mother because of it. The dog bit you because you suddenly screamed, my husband lectured me. As I sat there, dumbfounded by his words, my father and 3 brothers entered the cafe. It turned out that when my husband had sent that message, I had informed my father that I was being summoned, and he had called my 3 brothers as well. Surrounded by 4 well-built men, all trained in basketball, my husband's voice trembled and he shrank back. A comically pitiful sight that was frankly laughable. My daughter has been hurt because of you. My sister wants a divorce. You agree, right? Under their intense gaze, my husband meekly agreed. They continued pressing him until he agreed to the divorce and compensation terms. I handed him the divorce papers. Please sign here for the divorce. Reluctantly, he complied and left the cafe. Thanks to my family's support, the divorce was finalized. And I received compensation from him. My lawyer also secured compensation from my mother-in-law for my injuries. It turned out the police had questioned her about the dog biting me, leading to a stern warning and her having to give up the dog. My mother-in-law had overly pampered the dog since she got it, leading the dog to perceive humans as weaker than itself. After biting me, the dog also attacked her, becoming quite aggressive. Her injury was severe, resulting in a broken wrist. Now, she struggles with daily activities due to her incapacitated wrist. My husband had to move back to his parents' home after we vacated the apartment, where we lived together. Due to her limited mobility, my mother-in-law relies on him, asking, Soda, can you help with the laundry? Can you cook something? However, my husband had never done household chores before. Consequently, he was unable to manage laundry or cooking on his own. Why can't you do anything? Oh, it hurts. It's all your fault, Mama, became a frequent argument between them, leading to endless quarrels. Furthermore, rumors spread among relatives and at his workplace that he was divorced due to his emotional abuse towards his wife, shredding his pride. Interestingly, I was the one who initiated these rumors. While hospitalized, I had shared his behavior with a coworker who was known for being talkative. Telling this person turned out to be the right move as he chatted about emotional abuse, Mama's boy, and the divorce, making my husband an easy target at work. Serves him right. With the support of my parents and brothers, I am now living happily.